because I think that she has a lot to tell us as as a friendly outsider who comes from another part of the world who says, oh, I noticed this thing about other people that I think might change your perspective. All right, so our next speaker is in line with some of the other speakers that we've been hearing from, and I think it's really cool that there are these currents running through. He is, first of all, he's wearing a fantastic watch today. Please pay attention to it when he's talking. It's really incredible. That's one thing, but it's not important. He graduated from Tufts in 2013, so he is already a Jumbo, and he's studying in his first year as a master's student in the Child Development Department. He's got a big thing for hip-hop music, as will soon be revealed. He also really likes creativity and teaching creativity to children and exploring what it means to be creative and where those sources of creativity come from. And I think he's got a lot to offer to us in terms of challenging our current thoughts about where we get our inspiration from and where we should be getting our inspiration from. So without any further ado, here is Mr. Dylan Portelance.
Several years ago, a 14-year-old girl logged on to Scratch. Scratch is an online community where kids ages 8 to 18 are logging on every single day to create animated stories and games with a simple, kid-friendly programming language that they can then share with their peers online. This particular girl wanted to build a game, but it wasn't just any old game. She wanted the background of her game to scroll from left to right as her character moves, sort of like in Mario or Sonic the Hedgehog. So this girl tinkers for a while, and she starts to get a little bit frustrated, and she then decides to turn to the Scratch community to ask for help. And she writes, "Help! I made my first scrolling project, but I don't understanding it very much. I also looked at what others have said, but I still don't understand. If someone could tell me how to scroll step by step and very easy, that would help me a lot." So not too long after, another kid logs on to Scratch, and he sees this girl's plea, so he decides to create a tutorial for side-scrolling games. And then something really cool happened. That first girl found the tutorial and sampled some of the code for her own project. In other words, she took some of the code from the tutorial and actually put it in her own code, in her own Scratch project, in order to finish it. And then, her project was shared over 6,000 times by other members of the Scratch community. In 1974, jazz musician Bob James had a small problem. He had a few minutes left to record in his album, but he had run out of recorded material, or written material for that matter. So he decided to just record a quick sketch in one take with no vocals and just finish up the album that way as quickly as possible. Now, the record Nautilus that he ended up putting at the end of the album wasn't a hit. In fact, it wasn't anything close to a hit. But you'd probably be really surprised by that if you knew how often it appeared on hip-hop records as a sample. You see, several years later, artists such as Run DMC and Slick Rick and Warren G, they were all captivated by the sounds within Nautilus and wanted to use it within their own work. So what's the result of this? Bob James himself says, "It shows how music can take on a life of its own." All the creative ways that hip-hop artists sampled his work, from cutting up snippets of the bass line to looping the drums or manufacturing an entirely new synthesizer line based on Bob's synthesizer line, it brought a smile to his face. And eventually, it started to bring the hip-hop crowd to his performances. Because of sampling, Bob James became a cross-canonical artist. He was able to impact music beyond his time in the limelight as a jazz musician. Scratch users and hip-hop artists show us how the people who sample, they have an increased set of source material. Musicians without sampling, were once limited to the talent within their community and the variety within their library of musical instruments. But with sampling, they have the entire history of recorded material at their fingertips. Similarly, in Scratch, You can log on and see the code behind any animated story or game that another kid has created. And just by clicking a button, you can take some of that code and put it into your own project. Scratch users and hip-hop artists have boundless palettes to paint with. Scratch users and hip-hop artists also show us that those who get sampled benefit from increased promotion of their work and the broadening of their influence. As we saw with the 14-year-old girl whose project was shared over 6,000 times with the Scratch community, and how Bob James's music was given a new life within the canon of hip-hop, these artists who get sampled, their work is given to the world, and their audience increases. There's another reason why I think we need sampling, and this has to do with the type of culture that we create when we sample. A culture of creativity. Sir Isaac Newton once said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Fittingly, he sampled a bit about shoulders of giants from George Herbert, about 20 to 30 years earlier, when he said, "A dwarf on a giant's shoulders sees farther than two." And this bit about the dwarf and the giant's shoulders was sampled from a French philosopher several centuries earlier, when he said, "We are all like dwarves standing upon the shoulders of giants and so able to see more and see farther than the ancients." A more contemporary figure, Steve Jobs, once said, "When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something. It seemed obvious to them after a while." That's because they were able to connect experiences they've had and synthesize new things. If you ask someone in a culture with sampling how they did something, there's only one honest answer that they could give. I sampled the world around me. It relieves us of the romantic notion that we have creative geniuses. It takes a village to create, not just the spark within one of its citizens. Cultures of sampling dismantle the myth that only certain people within society hold all the cards when it comes to pushing the paradigms of art and technology and innovation. If we embrace the practice of sampling, we could come incredibly close to a community that pushes forward as the result of radical collaboration between all possible parties. With the internet, this is actually an easy feat. We have the technology to access a wide variety of source material without digging in the crates like hip-hop artists of the 80s and 90s did. But couldn't the people who get sampled go unnoticed? I don't think so. Because people who use the internet have shown us over and over again that they're both willing and capable to dig up where these samples are coming from so that no original artist is left behind. We could build this culture of creativity right now. If we sample each other, rather than relying on our isolated abilities and resources, we have the power to not only create a vastly greater range of contributions to the world, but we could also draw from a vastly greater range of artistic resources. And we could do it together. Creativity could be our culture, and that's why we need sampling.